And if you just came on and you haven't heard lately what Dr. Tim and I were just talking about, Blog Talk is going away as of January 31st, 2025. And so we've been looking at different scenarios of where we can do live broadcasts, where we can store archives. And so Dr. Tim had talked to the people who do the Journey Stream, and they made some suggestions, and we've received other suggestions from different people, and we're looking into all of them. And we have 2 months to make a choice of which direction to go. And if you're on our mailing list, we will send out an email when we know what we're going to do, and we'll also be announcing it here as well. So just stay tuned. We'll let you know as soon as we know. And Michael's with us, so I'm going to say welcome, Michael.
Thank you, dear heart. And welcome, everybody. Honored and delighted that you're here once again for us to move this amazing conversation forward into the as complete as possible an understanding of just how our human minds work and interact in this world that we call the world of bodies, in this world that we call the world of matter, neither of which is true, and getting to honor the truth so much that you're able to truly interact directly with the truth and know who you really are. And our best question, guide people into that inquiry or into that state of knowing who you are, is hold a newborn child. Bypass all the stuff that's going on for you as you hold that newborn, and tap into the newborn and ask yourself, who is this? What is this? And if you're listening carefully, you'll get the answer. This is love. This is human life. This is what we're really here for. This is what we're here to express and experience. And so we started this conversation almost 15 years ago, been doing it an hour a day, 5 days a week for the last, in the end of January, it'll be 15 years. So we'll be going into that 15th year. And we're delighted that you're here to be part of the conversation. Miss Jeannie, do we have anybody on the phone queue with a hand up or anything happening in the chat room? By the way, if you're listening and you're on one of the syndicated stations where we can't see you, our call-in number is 563-999-3581. If you call that number directly, you'll be listening to the show on your phone. And then, if you push 1, that'll raise a hand in the control panel and we'll have a conversation. So if there's anything we can support you with in regard to this work, please ask away.
We do not have a hand up. However, I did get a text from someone, Camille. Right. She says, I cannot call in during the broadcast hours, but I have a frequent thought upon which I'd appreciate your offering. I will listen to the archives. When a new symptom is first realized, how do we avoid or prevent reoccurring thoughts that it will, quote, get worse as we age, unquote?
Well, sadly, the whole culture, the whole material culture, there are a number of places we could start with this conversation, but the whole material culture says matter is deteriorating and you're going to deteriorate, age, and die. One of the most influential thoughts I found in that regard was I heard spoken from a medical doctor's lips about 40 years ago. I was at a medical conference, and a man there was reporting on the research done by a group called the DeCourcy Clinic in Cincinnati, Ohio. And here's what, and I heard this quote just once. It was burned into my brain. And here's what they said. Time is not toxic. Time has no effect on tissue under any conditions. It is the belief in the effect of time by those who subscribe to such a belief that acts as a poison. So, Camille, you just opened a question about the whole body of work. What do we do about it? Well, you've been in intensive, and you might remember that when somebody says, what do we do about this? I get a grin on my face. I turn to my 4x8 whiteboard, and I write in nice big letters, all of the above. If you go back to our first radio show 15 years ago, and you listen to every hour that I've done, every hour that Dr. Tim's done, you won't hear either of us say a word other than to answer your question. It's every tool you've got. Of course, the world has given us this deep belief in deterioration, entropy. Matter is busy winding down. They didn't tell us about ectopy, which is the opposite of entropy. That an energetic system that stays connected to a higher energy source is forever lifting upward. But if you connect to an energy source that is of a lower nature than where you have been lifted to, then entropy will take over. The winding down process will begin. So one of the core tools, of course, is going to be forgiveness. Recognizing that forgiveness has been turned backward in our culture, we're working to introduce a true idea of forgiveness, not the fraud that the Greeks offered us, that, of course, whatever it is that's going on, it's all your fault. And all I have to do is forgive you. When I let you off the hook, then everything's going to be okay. Because, of course, you're to blame for what's moving inside of me. So we're proposing a true idea of forgiveness, which is not that one. Got nothing to do with I'm going to let you off the hook for what's happening inside of me. But if there is an untoward energy moving inside of me, guess what? Now, over time, that untoward energy is going to have a deteriorating influence. And it's going to happen over a period of what we call time, so it looks like time must be the enemy. But once again, I invite you to remember, time is not toxic. Time has no effect on human tissue under any conditions. It is the belief in the effect of time by those who subscribe to such a belief that acts as a poison. So the real work that needs to be done is in the mind, is correction in the mind. And to rid yourself of this whole idea of aging, suffering, and death, which means all you have to do is resolve and forgive within yourself every idea based in the falsity of aging, suffering, and death. Does aging, suffering, and what we call death happen? Absolutely. Is it a cause unto itself, or is it the result of a cause? My offering is it's a result of a cause. And when you go to the cause itself, rather than to the effect, then you get to change the result you produce. And that's the whole objective. Like from moment one of this work, that's our whole reason for doing this. And if you go to the opening words in the book of John, which were told by the Greeks, we are errantly told by the Greeks, says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word became flesh. When you go to the actual opening words in the original language that text was spoken and written, what you hear are the words, in the beginning was the mind energy, and the mind energy became flesh. So that becomes the starting point, and I actually started with this idea the other day, and we got into a different conversation, so didn't really get to complete. I was kind of laying a foundation to take my level of understanding of the quantum still point process that we've created a step further and work toward explaining it, and that just fits perfectly with your question. So when you realize that we're told, and I'm going to be repeating some of the things that I said on Friday, because it's exactly where my conversation was heading anyway, was in, so it was in anticipation of your question. So mind energy becomes flesh. So you think a thought, you bring a thought into your energy field, and if you were able to see with eyes that could see in a wider energy range than our eye purportedly sees. And one of the challenges of speaking about this is our words are so inaccurate and so inadequate. And that's why ultimately what we're working to do with these tools is lead people into having an experience. I use the words of the culture, well, your eye sees. And the truth is, your eye doesn't see anything. You've never seen anything in your life, and you never will see anything in your life with your eye. Yes, your eye will bring light energy in. It's true. There'll be information carried on that light energy. And that light energy, according to the content in your mind that matches it, will cause certain information to fire in brain cells. And that firing of brain cells will produce within you a construct called perception. And that construct, you will think you're looking at it with your eyes, and you'll think it's outside of you because, of course, you're seeing it with your eyes. When the truth is, your brain generates it. Everything you think you see outside of you is an image painted on the inside of your eyeballs by your own brain. Yes, it relates to what's going on in the outer world because it's resonated into activity or action based upon the information that comes in via light energy to the eye. If you want to really take a deeper look at that whole idea, because it's a powerful turnaround from what the culture teaches, jump on YouTube and search for a presentation by Anil Seth, a TED Talk. So put in TED, Anil, A-N-I-L-S-E-T-H. And he's a neuroscientist at the University of Sussex in England. And he goes through how the brain produces perceptual constructs and paints them on the inside of our eyeballs. So the language is so inadequate, but we're gonna hobble along with it anyway. So you introduce a thought into the mind. The thought becomes a neuropeptide. You can look at the work of Bruce Lipton as a cell biologist, and he'll tell you that every thought, when it enters your field, becomes a molecule, what we call physical. It's a neuropeptide, and that neuropeptide will circulate around in your structure until it finds a cell with a receptor site that matches, and it will land on that cell. So the thought, the neuropeptide that reflects the thought, lands on literally an antenna structure, receptor site, and if you were sitting inside the cell watching, the thought that you just thought will enter the cell, and it will look to your eye like chemistry. Mind energy becomes flesh. So energy fields that come in through the eye resonate experience in us, and that becomes perception. And if our perception says a certain thing, then that becomes our speech. Now, if, the book we sit and read tells us how, when the clock ticks and the years go by, you get old, then of course you'll hear people, and it's kind of a shock oftentimes to people, especially when people will ask about our granddaughter, and they'll say, how old is she? And I'll say, she isn't. And they kind of stutter and look at me like, what do you mean? What do you mean she isn't? Notice what's built into our language about our smallest, youngest, most innocent children. We talk about old in regard to them. That's mind energy. If you buy it, then it will become your chemistry and it will become your flesh. There's a particular chunk of mind energy that we don't want to deal with, that we deny and try to avoid. Then our words, representing particular pictures and constructs of our minds based on the mind energy that we hold within us, resonated by what happens in the world, then the pictures formed in the mind out of that mind energy we'll think are really out there, are really outside of us. There's a thing we talk about in our Laws of Living work called regulatory speech. And that's the speech that regulates literally our physiology, our perception, our words, our creative processes, our emotions. And most of the world, in regard to the things that cause what we call aging to happen, live in the state of denial. And denial is the act of thinking or speaking as though something outside of us is the cause of what's moving inside of us. For example, an event will happen and someone wants to be Mr. or Ms. Nice Guy, and you say, well, what do you think about that event? Oh, I'm not upset about it. I'm not angry. What did that person just tell me? That the disintegrative energies of upset and anger, they do not wish to be responsible for. They do not want to deal with them. And so they are, with language like that type of regulatory speech, we dissociate from those energetic patterns and they get stuck in tissue. And that causes what we call aging. Again, it's got nothing to do with time. It's got to do with the quality of energy that's in the structure. So the forgiveness process is about removing those things that never been resolved. So when a particular energy field resonates in us, that resonance sets up a field that reaches out into the world and through resonance attracts certain results. I.e., if I don't want to feel that upset, then I will probably be attracted to, let's say, a fifth of scotch or a cup of coffee or an extra spoonful of sugar to shut down that energy that I don't want to deal with. And these energy fields, in the same way we talk about regulatory speech, we could talk about them as regulatory fields. And if a certain image, a certain piece of information comes in through the eye via light energy, and it resonates something that's stored within our body's mind, and the ancient idea of the body, or the ancient speech about the body it was called Adam, or Adamos, or the red clay. If we're run by those energy fields of what we don't want to have happen, what we don't want to feel, what we don't want to see, what we don't want to experience, then in the ancient teachings that would be called asleep in Adam, Adamos, the red clay. So a mass accumulation of mind energy from the past, replicated in the present, stored in the carbon structure of the cell, for many people become the projected fears and upsets about the future. And those are the things that create the process of aging, deterioration, and death. And we do it to ourselves. Probably one of the most profound insights that you'll find in the ancient scriptures comes in the book of Adam, where Adam, wonderful, upright man, he's got everything, he's wealthy, great family, everything is just awesome in his life. And all of a sudden, his life begins to fall apart. And in almost the opening words in that book of Job, talks about his fear. And then he, in processing, attempting to work through what he's created, early in his processing, he has the insight, that which I feared most has come upon me. Of course, what are one of the fears that we've been brainwashed with in this culture? Oh, aging, decrepitness, suffering, and death. Well, if that's one of your fears, then guess what's going to come upon you, Creator? Let go of that and replace it with trust and embracing whatever energies move from a state of conscious, active, present love, and you're able to process out those decay-causing energies. But it wasn't until, and if you read that whole book of Job, it's a pretty long book. If you read the whole thing, Job has this insight early, that which I feared most has come upon me, but he's not sure. He's got all kinds of people around him that keep him in doubt and suffering and blame, and they keep that whole game going. Then, if you read all through a whole thing, all these people come and sit with him for days. People come and lament with him, and they suffer with him, and they accuse him, and he accuses them. I mean, he just goes through a whole process. Kind of ultimately the process everybody's going to have to go through, have clarity of mind, and then just before he gets the turnaround and everything's made onto him again, everything's taken care of, he says, I choose to change my words. You remember in the scriptures they said, take care of the heart, for out of it are the issues in life. Aging is not in physiology. Aging is in the mind. That word heart there in the Aramaic language, take care of the heart, for out of it are the issues in life, would be properly translated as the unconscious. Take care what goes on inside of you, that which prompts you into words about that which you fear. Find a way to go into your own unconscious, your heart, and clean those things out, because they are the energy fields that will run the show. And then you remember another section in the text that says, the power of life and death is in your words. If asleep in Adam, that story about the creation of Adam, it says he fell into a deep sleep. Doesn't say anything about him waking up. Go through the whole Old Testament. This is like right in the very earliest parts. He falls asleep. Go through the whole thing. Never did talk about Adam waking up. Until thousands of years later, and it speaks about being awake in Christ. That one steps out of carbon-based memory. And, this one of death is a big one, because everybody that you and I know that's over 120 is already dead. So it must be true. Being able to unglue your mind from that. How many people do we watch get decrepit and old and fall apart and suffer and die? Being able to free your mind of that when there's so much demonstration for the opposite. Why is there such a demonstration for the opposite? Because everybody believes aging, suffering, and death are just part of the game, part of the process. And be it done unto you according to your beliefs, says Yeshua. As a man thinketh in his heart. So the undoing, the forgiveness. And if we simply replay the dynamics that have gone on in our generations, remember they talked about how the sins of the fathers will be passed down to 3 and 4 generations. Their beliefs are the root of our beliefs. And so one must question that. You remember another statement in the scriptures, and many people have misinterpreted this. It says, in order to follow me, you've got to hate your mother and hate your father. It's like, oh, I thought this teaching was about love. Well, actually, in Aramaic, the word that was translated there is hate. It's not hate as in a love-hate relationship, but you've got to separate yourself from the mind energy of the past, else it will replicate in your physiology. So that's all those thoughts stored in carbon-based memory. And, the whole world is basically run by it. All they can do is replicate, replicate, replicate. In fact, there's a book about this topic. You might want to go to www.whyagain.org/book and download a copy of a book about the replicate mind. It's called Why Is This Happening to Me Again? It's free. It's free on the site in about 9 different languages. And so confronting everything in you, especially the beliefs about suffering and death, would be fit subject for forgiveness. And then simultaneously stepping into a different source of mind energy than what the world has fed to us. And developing trust for that mind energy. All the world is circled around talking about their ailments, and if you've ever gone to an organ recital, where people stick together to talk about who had the latest organ removed and who's had the most organs removed, and mine was the worst the doctor had ever seen. It's like, for many people, it's their red badge of courage. You've got to exit that conversation. And to remove oneself from carbon-based memory and the stored power person dynamic in particular, and develop the ability to listen to the presence in you, let go of the addiction to the chemistry, quote unquote, of the mind energy of the past, and develop the ability to listen to the presence of active love in you and the guidance that is there. To dissolve and teach you the way to forgive, to remove those anciently believed mind energy situations that are false. Get rid of it. And recognize that one of the things I'm seeing more and more, and realizing that the addiction needs to be broken, is the addiction to the literal physiological chemistry of the mind energy of our past. One of the things that I'm seeing, and the conversation I started with Friday, was talking about the quantum still point session I'd done the previous Saturday on myself for the first time. And that one of the things that, at least it appears so far with the people I've been working with, that it does, is it breaks the addiction to those past patterns. So we want to weaken those patterns and ultimately break the addiction to them. And when you can link to a new source of energy, which is that source in which you live, move, and have your being, then all of life reorganizes itself around you. It's kind of like when you let go of that addiction, it's like crawling out of a cave that you didn't know you were in. And as you crawl out of that cave, everything is so different. Everything is so shifted and changed. Everything is so alive that you wonder how you ever lived in the cave. And the cave, in this regard, in regard to your question, my offering, Camille, would be this deeply held cultural belief in aging, suffering, and death, and each time it comes up, to apply the forgiveness process, literally weaken the energy fields that go along with that belief. Shift the addiction from the fear into confidence and connectedness with Source. Of course, then follow your intuition and guidance on what do I need to eat to upgrade my physiology? What do I need to put into my body? What rest do I need? What do I need to take care of myself to become more and more vital? So that would be my best answer to the question. I hope that helps. And if anything else specific, once you get a listen to this, certainly send back a message and we'll continue the conversation. Thank you for asking the question. So, Ms. Jeannie, do we have anybody else out there in the phone queue with a hand up? Anything happening in the chat room?
It is all quiet. We have a lot of listeners on the switchboard today, so somebody, if you've got a question, press 1. It puts a hand up.
If you're out there, again, calling number is 563-999-3581. Otherwise, we'll go back to the Gospel of Thomas. We've been covering that now for the last couple of months. And we'll continue with the next saying. And that next saying is saying 85. And saying 85, and if you haven't been with us listening as we've gone through this, the Gospel of Thomas is one of those texts that did not become canonized at the Council of Nicaea when the warring king decided he wanted to consume Christianity for his own purposes, Constantine. And around about 325 created a thing called the Council of Nicaea, where they decided which books supported the king and which did not. And you come all the way forward into, more modern times, and you hear King James, and he does another whole round of edits where he brings in the divine right of kings and such, because he wants what he wants when he wants it. But in any event, the Book of Thomas, rather than a storing format, such as most of the other books, this one is simply a series of the inner sayings of Yeshua. So we're on saying 85. If you want to catch up with us, there's a page on our YouTube channel with the archives and on our website that you can go back and listen to what we've talked about. So saying 85 is, Adam came into being out of a great power and a great wealth, and yet he was not worthy of you. And it's interesting that this saying, it goes right to exactly your question, so there's a good foundation. So he says, he was not worthy of you. Adam, Adamos, the one who was living in red clay, was not worthy of one who knows who they are as human beings, in essence, they're saying. And he says, for if he had been worthy, he would not have tasted death. So, being, again, we talked about this earlier, remember that there are two creation stories. There's one about humans being created in the image and likeness of the Creator. He created the male and female, period, done. No mention of Adam. Then Adam is created, Adamos, the red clay, And then, as though he knew exactly what he was talking about, Moses writes about how, and then, and the word that represents in Aramaic the created being is nafsha. The word that represents the clay being is Adamos or Adam. Two creation stories occur, and then it says, and the Creator breathed nafsha into Adamos, and nafsha became a living or an incarnated being. You know, that second creation story is that we hear Moses saying there was no man to till the soil. He wasn't getting senile, as some people have suggested. He knew exactly what he was writing about. Being is created. And then carbon-based memory is created. And what's one of the first things that happens to him? He falls into a deep sleep. And my offering would be that what this passage is telling us is that that deep sleep is falling into the delusional mind of man, or in Aramaic, Satan. Again, we've repeated this one several times because it's such a bugaboo in our culture. Satan, the devil made me do it. There's this creature out there, and that creature is 1,000% a product of those who are card-carrying members of the one world universal religion of blame, guilt, fault, suffering, and victimhood. And we get what the definition of exactly what Yeshua was talking about when he uses the word Satan, and that's the definition we're interested in, when he's talking to Peter outside of the Garden of Gethsemane, and he says to Peter, "Get thee behind me, Satan, for you think in the mind of man rather than the plan of God." Remember, Peter's going to interfere. He's going to get in the way, and he's going to stop this whole crucifixion thing from happening. And Yeshua refers to Peter directly as Satan, and he says, "Get thee behind me," and then he defines precisely what he means by Satan, and it's not the dude with the red suit, the tail, and the pitchfork. What's he say? He says, "For you think in the mind of man rather than the plan of God." You're stuck in carbon-based memory. So when Adam makes something more important than his human life, that is the great power and great wealth, as Yeshua speaks about in this saying 85. Adam came into being out of a great power and a great wealth. And when he made something more important than that, what is that great power and that great wealth? Go back and hold the newborn. It is the active presence of love. It is your source. And when you make something more important than that, when you make any goal more important, then the mind turns its hostility and fear toward the insane. So when you make some goal more important than being connected to this source of active present love, makes anything, when you're addicted to the chemistry of mind energy moving in your body that is based in hostility or fear, then you lose your connection to being, to the physiological presence of love, because you get lost in the material mind and the material world. So what he's saying here is when somebody does that, they're not worthy of, they're not supportive of the eternal life that we were designed for. Remember that word sin again is simply an archery term that means off the mark. Energies that are off the mark create deterioration and death. Now, churchianity made this into an issue of being obedient to a wrathful deity that's up there somewhere, ready to pounce on you if you don't do everything you're told to do. And that's simply a power person message that most people have lived out from their parental relationships. Where when you go to the Aramaic, rather than a wrathful deity, you go through the whole Old Testament and you hear this wrathful, oh man, this guy is horrific. Like, who wants this God? And then Yeshua shows up and brings a whole correction. isn't some power outside of him off in the sky somewhere. He says it's within. And he describes it as not his father. Again, many will try to separate you from your power. It isn't his father, it's our Father. Good pleasure it is to give you the kingdom. What is the kingdom? It's a direct gift we were given from the beginning. In Aramaic, the kingdom of heaven is properly translated as the community of love. You were plunked right into the community of love from day one. And that's where you're designed to live. Not in obedience to some wrathful deity, but rather alignment. And alignment with your essential nature. Again, hold the newborn, tap in. What is your essential nature? It is love. What do you need to do to be aligned with that and incarnate love within your physiology? That's what will save you. You know, if you go to the Lord's, what they call the Lord's Prayer, it's not a prayer at all. What they called the Lord's Prayer is a set of instructions for how to orient and how to align yourself to capture and reflect love in the world. The word prayer meaning to set a trap for God. God being love, not the angry deity off in the sky. So Yeshua says, this Father that is within you, this parent figure who belongs to all of us, is within you and gave you a free gift, and the free gift is that of your human life. Free gift. In a bloodline and in a culture that is filled with hostility or fear becomes a very fragile thing to hold on to. You were given, at the moment the first breath of life was put in you, you were given a human life. You were given the gift of the experience of yourself as conscious, active, present love. And it's a free gift. It's given with the first breath. Again, if you ever doubt that, hold a newborn and tap into the essence of that newborn. And when you take that miscalculated, misrepresented, traumatized word as salvation, and you realize all it means is, in a world of rage and hatred and vengeance and grief and greed and pain and trauma, can you hold to your human life? If you can hold to your human life and make that the most powerful resonating energy at the moment, then your cells will be fed on love eternally. And most people give up the presence of love that they are and become so busy they won't even take the time to spend a few minutes connecting to that presence of love. That they give up the gift in order to use the tools of hostility and fear, and recognize that the whole culture pretty much wholesale is right into your forehead from day one, your membership card in the one world universal religion of blame, guilt, fault, suffering, and victimhood. And you must exchange that card. You must get rid of it and exchange it for your human life. Now, one who's fully self-identified as a full-fledged member of the one world universal religion of blame, shame, guilt, and victimhood, what Yeshua is saying with this saying is, you're not worthy. One who's lost into that is not worthy, and that one who's bought into those energies is in the process of disintegrating, giving up the gift of their human lives for an inferior, hollow life that causes suffering and death. That is suffering and death. And it's self-imposed. And the mechanism that creates that is invisible because we live in denial, blame, guilt, and shame. Living from a false self that it believes needs to die in order that life is possible. So once again, claim and live out of your given human life. You remember the statement, Tuve Hum, before each of the Beatitudes that we talked about last week, speaks of an earned reward, not so much in the sense of you've got to pay for it, but you're going to have to do your work in order to maintain it. You know, you've been given a human life. Can you keep it? Can you keep that free gift of this absolute, sweet, pure presence of being that is your actual life? And what do you have to do to earn it? Well, if you have once you bought into the one world universal religion of guilt, fault, blame, shame, and victimhood, then the earning is removing the self-imposed blocks to living in and as the energy of created love. And forgiving everything that does not belong. Removal. Forgiveness being removal of every tragic thought. Remember, mind energy becomes flesh. Literally, the mind energy becomes the molecule in the cell. And if we think in terms of molecules of death, fear, anger, sadness, guilt, rage, condemnation, gossip, slander, vengeance, then we're filling our cells with the chemistry of those energetic patterns. So you must forgive everything that has taken over love. And you must ultimately, the melody line in a popular song from years ago, give yourself to love if love is what you're after. But you can't buy into a world of hostility, fear, rage, guilt, blame, stories, telling stories about other people and trying to convince people that your stories about them are true, when every story you're trying to convince others about being true about somebody else is true about you, where there's upset. So the narrow gate is defined as, when Yeshua talked about, the gate is narrow and few will be that find it. Walking that line of literally being responsible for every energy of any type of hostility or fear, removing it from your life and going back to the presence of love, back to the presence of love. And if you're the first one in your bloodline, if you're not from a family system where that's already been instilled, and you're the early adopter, there's a huge amount of work to be done to free yourself from the past, from the generations. So we're here to hold your hand, uplift, and support you as you do the same for us. And together, we get to walk each other home. That's the real plan here. Walking each other home. Each assisting the other in seeing where hostility, fear, and blame have become part of the conversation, and recognizing that every word that you converse with becomes chemistry within your structure. And I see we're getting close to the last 10 minutes or so. Jeannie, do we have anybody in the phone queue with a hand up? anything happening in chat rooms. You're out there in listener land and you're on one of those stations where we can't see you. Our calling number is 563-999-3581. If you call that number, push 1, that'll raise a hand, and Jeannie will say, we've got a caller. Jeannie?
It is all quiet. We have a lot of people on the switchboard today, but nobody has a hand up. And Solly is with us from Finland in the chat room. There
Welcome,
are no
Solly.
questions. Yeah.
So I can only imagine, with quite a few listeners on the switchboard, that with what I just covered, it's been kind of like a review of the whole body of work, that there might be a question or two out there. So if there is, push 1 and let's talk about it. And if not, then let's just do a quick review process of forgiveness. You know, there's some powerful Harvard research, and I say this, I repeat this and repeat this and repeat it. And I do that because until the carbon-based memory system, the mind of Adam, has this strong enough built into brain cells, it's information that is buried. It just isn't available. But there's some powerful research out of Harvard University. Yes, this is stuff that was done back in the 50s. And it's actually the most quoted psychological research in history. And what they showed was that in a time frame where they could, and they had people hooked up to electrodes, in a time frame where they could measure 10,000 units of electrical activity happening in the brain, the max amount of data that was able to get into conscious awareness was 9 bits. So imagine the electrodes are showing 10,000 brain cells firing, but conscious awareness only holds 9 bits out of that 10,000. And that 9-bit world is what's called perception. Now, obviously, if 10,000 brain cells are firing and 9 bits are showing up, then we've got 9,991 bits that are out of view. What selected the 9 bits that one person is seeing? And somebody might be listening to the show right now and going, wow, this is really making sense. I'm getting this carbon-based memory stuff. And somebody else might be going, what's he talking about, carbon-based memory? That doesn't make any sense at all. Well, note that perceptual constructs of your mind are a product of what's happening inside of you. And what Yeshua provided 2,000 years ago, and when you tie it in with this Harvard research, it makes perfect sense. If 10,000 brain cells are firing and only 9 bits of data get into conscious awareness, what determines which 9 bits of information get into conscious awareness? What creates these constructs? What drives this process of the mind constructing its realities, especially if they're based in hostility or fear? And there's a really easy answer to that question. You will notice, unless you are, just a generally miserable person, you will notice that you're pretty happy with most everybody and what they're doing, as long as what they're doing is fulfilling the goals you have for them. You'll notice you don't go, and again, unless you're a generally miserable person, you don't go into upset until they violate one of your goals. You say to the people who are doing all the things you want them to do, you tend to say, I love you. And what you're really saying is, thank you for fulfilling the goals I have for you. I approve of you for that. And by God, if you violate one of the goals I have, watch how quickly my love can turn to some form of hostility. And hostility, as opposed to what the culture teaches me, that hostility is an emotion, hostility is actually an internally produced drug to anesthetize and keep pain hidden. And Yeshua brought this gigantic piece of information. It's been around for 2,000 years plus, and there's nowhere else on the planet that I know of, aside from the first century Aramaic teachings of Yeshua, and it also shows up, by the way, in the Course in Miracles, which to me meets the standard of they both came from the same source, that the word forgive in Aramaic is shabag, and it doesn't mean forgive. What it means is to cancel, and it has to do with canceling goals. If you load a goal in your mind that causes your mind to use some form of unresolved hostility or fear, then you will, and you're pointing that goal at somebody else, then you'll take your own unresolved disease energies, your own hostility or fear, and you build a picture of them out of it, and they'll show up in your mind with your problem attached. And to shabag, to cancel that goal, is to collapse that projected image, that perceptual construct that you think is about somebody else, and when it collapses, you get to drop back inside yourself, and you get to directly experience the hostility or fear-based energy that needs to be healed. And if you bring love to that, and this is the core of forgiveness, by canceling the goal, the perceptual construct of your mind collapses in on itself, and you get to confront what's in your own unconscious, and you get to do it with active present love in your mind. And when that happens, the disease energies, the energies of aging, begin dissolution, and you get to heal. It's a brilliant piece of information. Doesn't exist anywhere else that I know of on planet Earth. Now, many people will say, and we're down to the last minute or so, but just a couple more thoughts. Many people say, well, but this is a really wonderful goal. I just want this person that I'm so enraged with to love me because, well, that's all. I just want them to love me. What's wrong with that? Why should I cancel that goal? Well, don't cancel the goal because you want them to love you. Cancel the goal because when you put the goal in your mind goes into rage. And your disease is rage. Your aging is rage. Your suffering, your pain, that which will ultimately kill you is your own rage. So now forgive as to your rage. Cancel the goal you hold for the person who gives you the gift of showing you your rage. Drop into your own unconscious rage. Breathe and process it out. Ask for assistance in removing that energy, so that you're freed. And of course it could be rage or sadness or grief or guilt or hatred or vengeance or any of those things. And as you do that, you are freed. And that's what we're here to support you in, becoming free literally of the generations of the past. So you don't cancel a goal because you don't want it. Gee, of course I want this person to cooperate with me or whatever. I cancel because I now am adult enough to recognize that every time I load this goal in my mind, it brings up some form of hostility or fear. So I must have some hostility or fear to heal, to be forgiven, to be removed. And forgiveness means removal. And this is a technology removal. If you go to your app store and you type in the words Heartland, Heartland, Aramaic, Aramaic, forgiveness, you'll be looking at the world's only forgiveness app. The whole process of how to do it is laid out there. If you have questions from within the app, you can send us your questions by email. There's a button there. Just hit it, put your question in, hit send. Jeannie will read it on the radio show. We'll answer it and send you back a link to the show that answers your questions. In the meantime, it's an awesome opportunity to create the best year yet of your eternal life. We support you in doing that. Thanks for joining.